So for the easy exam coming up in this class, obviously I can't enforce whether you're using books and notes, so I mean, how hard can it be? I propose giving you 1 hour, so 1 hour to answer questions about the various machines that I've been using this semester to do the lab activities. I might provide you with a picture of the machine and ask you to identify the parts of the machine. So it'll be a combination of multiple choice and short answer questions. I might show a picture, for example, of a universal testing machine, and I might ask you to identify where the loading deck is, where the crosshead is, maybe the frame, the controller. That machine that was used for lab number 1 had a controller. Remember that blue box? The controller controls the hydraulic pump. The universal testing machine used in lab number 3 did not have a controller because it was not computer controlled. So I'll definitely be asking you to identify various parts of the machine. So I might ask you to calculate, for example, the modulus of elasticity of the concrete specimen. I'll also ask you about the ingredients that went into making the concrete. So make sure that you watch that video of me making the concrete. Make sure you took notes on how much of each ingredient I put into making the concrete cylinder. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else. So make sure you can identify the machine parts. I mentioned the universal testing machine, both of them. And there was also the torsion testing machine. Do you remember the torsion testing machine? I do. I remember that dial on the front, that dial that you turn to add load to the specimen. And there were 3 buttons on the front. I'm not there now, obviously, but if you go back and watch the video, you'll know what I'm talking about. So lab number 1 was the tensile test of steel. So I'll ask you about the machine that was used in that. And then lab number 2, I guess we did lab number 2 before we did lab number 1. Lab number 2, I'll ask you to identify the parts of the strain indicator box. Remember the BLH strain indicator box? I'll ask you to identify parts of that. And then lab number 3 was Poisson's ratio, so we used a universal testing machine for that also, but not the computer-controlled universal testing machine. And then lab number 4 was the torsion test. The torsion test, make sure you can identify the parts of that machine for the torsion test. And then lab number 5 was making concrete, but making concrete isn't totally a part of this course, really. I mean, we have to do it so that we can break the 4 cylinders, but I'm not going to ask you any theoretical questions about lab number 5, except what were the ingredients and how many pounds of each did I use. So when you watch that video, probably what I did was, I know I did this, I gave you the weight of the bucket, and I gave you the weight of the bucket with the contents in it. So obviously if you subtract those, you'll figure out what the weight of the ingredients were. I think I was pretty consistent with the weight of the ingredients that I listed on that little whiteboard at the beginning of the video, remember? But make sure you can tell me how many pounds of each ingredient went into making the concrete. And then lab number 6, I'll ask you some brief calculation questions. I'll ask you to do some brief calculations on lab number 6, which was breaking concrete. So make sure you can do that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Lab number 7 was buckling, but in this class we haven't done that lab activity in years, so being that this is an online course, you really didn't miss anything with regards to lab 7. Because lab number 7, we haven't done that one in years, but I did post a video in Canvas that gives you some idea of what we could do with such a lab activity. And then what am I up to? Lab number 8. Lab number 8 was beam bending, which is a little bit beyond the scope of this course. Lab number 8 is probably something that would go along with the 321 class if we had a lab part of that class, if we had a lab component to that class. So I'm not going to ask you anything about lab number 8 because the lab report for that was so heavily involved with calculations. And then lab number 9 was using the shake table. We haven't done that particular lab activity in years, but I did post a video of a very brief video of when I did do that lab activity many years ago. It's using the shake table, which would be more appropriate for a course in mechanical vibrations. So if you ever take our mechanical engineering, I think it's, what is the number on that one? Mechanical engineering I forget the number. But if you ever take the mechanical vibrations course from the ME department, lab number 9 would be a good lab activity for that particular course. And then lastly, lab number 10 was breaking a wooden portal frame. That's the only one that you missed out on that we would normally do for an in-person course. But for this one, I did post a video of me doing lab number 10 a couple of semesters ago. So if you're interested in lab number 10, what we would have done had this been an in-person course, you can go in and watch that. But wait, there's more! So one last thing that I want to remind you about, lab number 6, I want you to be able to identify the parts of the machines that we used in lab number 6. So you have to be able to identify the parts of the Tinius-Olson compression testing machine and the ELE concrete compression testing machine. Know about the various controls and the various gauges that we have on those machines. I know that the Tinius-Olson machine had 2 separate gauges, the high range and the low range gauge. The ELE machine had a touch screen on it. So just have some familiarity with those 2 machines, and like I said, be able to identify the different parts. Also be able to tell me what the failure loads were for the 4 specimens that were tested, the failure loads and the failure modes. So the final exam will consist of some short answer questions, some multiple choice. The short answer questions, you'll type your answers right there into Canvas. The multiple choice, that's self-explanatory. You'll see that there'll be a question, and then you'll have to choose from one of several answers. Or there might be some matching questions where you match column A with column B, for example. So short answer, multiple choice, maybe some matching, and then some file uploads where you'll have to do some simple calculations on paper and then upload your work right there in Canvas. So I'll only accept PDF or JPEG files. Please know HEIC files or pages files. And so that's really what the final exam will be like.